I spent a lot of time on this one. I hope it's worth your time. For Mom. I want to share 2 stories that the late Dr. Jack Provencher once told in sermons, stories that have stayed with me for decades. I've always felt these were not just stories. More and more as time passed, they were stories that were quietly, faithfully lived out in my mother's life. I loved to tell her those stories, especially toward the end of her life, because they said so much about her. And her humble, quiet, sincere life said so much about those stories. She always seemed to like me telling her those stories, memories I treasure, and I want to share them with you now, for Mom's sake. I'm retelling them here from memory, as faithfully as I can, because together they form a lens through which I see with clarity her whole life of gratitude. This will take a while, so sit down, relax, and I hope you fully enjoy what I've written. It comes in 4 parts: 1. The monk; 2. The crucifix; 3. My dear mom, friend, partner in so many things; and finally 4. A devotional breakdown of the monk story. 1. The monk and the angel. A monk was working in the monastery kitchen when an angel appeared to him and said, "It is time for you to take up your abode in eternity." The monk looked at the small mountain of pots and pans, the work half done, the duties still waiting. He pleaded that he might be allowed to finish what he was doing first. The angel looked at him in the wise and loving way of angels and said simply, "I will see what I can do," and disappeared. Time passed. The monk busied himself around the monastery, keeping the grounds, painting the barn, tending the garden. One day, as he was weeding, the angel appeared again and repeated the call. The monk lifted his hoe and with it pointed up and down the rows. "If I don't finish the garden, who will?" he asked. "May I stay long enough to finish this work?" Again the angel looked at him in that same wise, loving way of angels and said, "I will see what I can do." He vanished. Weeks went by. The monk continued serving, feeding the poor, clothing those in need, ministering to the sick. One day he was in the infirmary, about to give a glass of cool water to a dying patient, when the angel appeared once more. This time neither spoke. The monk silently lifted his eyes and with his own eyes, drew the eyes of the angel up and down the rows of the sick and the dying. Without a word, the angel understood and disappeared. Late that night, the monk lay on his pallet, exhausted. He looked up at the ceiling and said, "Lord, I am so tired. If you want to send your angel, I will see him now." Instantly the angel stood beside him. The old monk said, "If the Lord is still willing that I should take up my abode in eternity, I will go with you now." And the angel looked tenderly at the monk in the wise and loving way of angels and replied, "Where do you think you have been all this time?" 3. The crucifix and the crucified. Dr. Provencher also told another story, one he said was told by a Dr. Leslie Weatherhead. A young woman was dying of an illness that sounded like leukemia. She came from a faithful Catholic family who decided to take her to the healing shrine at Lourdes. When she arrived, the priest could see she was far too weak to participate in the ceremonies as others did. Instead, he gave her a small silver crucifix and told her that when the host was elevated in the Mass, she should cling to the crucifix and pray that she would be healed. When that moment came, she clung tightly to the crucifix and prayed with all her heart to be healed. But she was not healed. She returned home, and there she continued to weaken and prepared to die. Before she died, she asked that Dr. Weatherhead come to see her. When he arrived, she handed him the silver crucifix and said, "Dr. Weatherhead, I want you to have this crucifix, because it taught me a lesson. It taught me not to cling to the crucifix and believe that I be healed, but to cling to the crucified and not let it matter." 3. The third witness. In Mom's own words. Near the end of her life, Mom left messages that now read like the final chapter of the same 2 stories Dr. Provencher once told. They were not sermons. They were not meant for an audience. They were simply her heart speaking plainly, sincerely, as it always did. In one message, she wrote to her children, "Arrows in my quiver. You all will hit the mark God has for you. I believe. I pulled back my bow and aimed right to Jesus. Go, go, go." She saw herself not as the destination, but as the one who had aimed carefully and then released. Like the monk, she did not cling to her work or her role, but she finished it. And then she let it go. But she finished it first. She often asked God for more time to finish her work. Many that know her know how she distributed books. 80 years old, crippling, unsteady on her feet, often all alone, she would walk door to door to hand out evangelistic books. When her health was failing the most, she yearned, almost pled to be able to go out and distribute books. Her final act before she got into bed, never to get up on her own power again, she collected her final harvest from her garden, put in her little wagon and parked it as close to the back door as she could get it where she knew I would find it. I could tell stories until the Lord comes again about how faithful she was in duty and honor. She marched in protest in Washington and other places. She faithfully wrote letters to political prisoners incarcerated for their faith and patriotic zeal. She always asked God for more time to do more work. Then one day she laid on her bed and she told God she was so weary. She was ready to, in the words of the monk, take her abode in eternity. She often spoke in great faith about her belief that the Lord would heal her completely. She clung to the crucified, believing she would be healed until just before she died. Then she clung to the crucified, and in the question of the healing she believed she'd been promised, she just didn't let it matter. She wrote, "I wish you enough hellos to get you through the final goodbyes. I wish you enough great memories to take you through to eternity." That is the voice of someone who already understood where she was going and what would be needed by those who remained. It is the voice of surrender without fear, love without grasping. She was clinging not to outcomes, not even to time, but to the crucified, and that was all that mattered. Then, in a message she titled, "My Last Journey, My Cup Overflows," she left what now feels like her own quiet theology of gratitude, written not for instruction but for testimony. She spoke of admiring those who suffered yet seemed renewed, hopeful, cheerful, always caring about others, patiently waiting for healing. She wrote that she saw herself becoming that person, not by striving, but by acceptance. She wrote of faith, hope, and trust, not as abstractions, but as daily companions. She wrote that she was taking God at His word, because she knew His word to be faithful. That Jesus gave her ideas and ways to cope. That God provided day by day. That she felt safe, of praying for her children, of gratitude for their care, thanking her children for their faithful companionship, of finding happiness in her garden. And she ended by speaking of her gratitude to God for her journey, until it was completed. Thanking God for her painful, wasting journey, not for as long as she had to endure it, but until it was completed, until her work was done. She would ask for strength to finish. Read together now, her words complete what the stories only began to say. Like the monk, she lived eternity now, in duty, gratitude, usefulness, and love, right up until the work was done. Like the young woman with the crucifix, she did not measure faith by healing, but by trust. She clung to Christ, not to relief. Her life was not dramatic. It was deliberate. It was not loud. It was faithful. She did not depart early. She finished. She finished on time. She finished well. Now when I hear the angel's question, "Where do you think you have been all this time?" I think I finally know the answer more completely than when I told her the stories. She had been with Him all along. His kingdom was already in her heart already in the kingdom. When she was in the garden, sweeping her floor, cleaning, washing her own small mountain of dishes, cooking, she was on holy ground. She was doing holy work, just as holy as evangelism, Bible study or prayer, because her heart was in the hand of God, fulfilling her duty given to her best ability, with a cheerful, grateful heart until she squeezed out the last of her ebbing strength in her work she loved to do. And maybe that's the final point I will make, she fully enjoyed every bit of what she was doing. It was all done with such happiness because it was done in love. There's a saying, "He ain't heavy. He's my brother." She carried great burdens, but she carried them in such grace and in such love. It wasn't heavy because he was her father. Many times during her final couple years I used to tell Mom that God was putting the final touches on His masterpiece. He was almost done with His masterpiece. That wasn't just rhetoric, it was true. She made great strides in the midst of her heaviest trials. I told her that because I meant it, and I meant it because I saw it. 4. The Faithful Monk, a devotional interpretation. The story of the old monk and the angel is a quiet masterpiece of moral and spiritual insight. Beneath its simple rhythm lies a profound theology of vocation, humility, and grace. It teaches that heaven is not a distant reward for the pious, but the natural atmosphere of a soul already living in harmony with God. 1. Faithfulness in the ordinary. The monk's holiness is not displayed in visions or miracles, but in the washing of pots, the tending of gardens, and the care of the sick. Each of these humble acts is performed with devotion and purpose. The lesson is unmistakable. God is not waiting for us to do great things. He is present in the faithful doing of small things. The kingdom of heaven begins not at death, but at the moment we learn to see our daily work as sacred service. When the angel appears and the monk hesitates to leave his chores, he is not resisting heaven. He is honoring the God who gave him the work. The monk's question, "Who will wash these pots?" is not an excuse to delay obedience, but a testament to his integrity. He will not abandon what God has entrusted to him until it is finished. In this way, he mirrors Christ himself, who could not turn from his mission until he could say, "It is finished." 2. The meaning of delay. Each time the angel departs with the words, "I will see what I can do," we are reminded that divine delay is not denial. The monk's continued life is not punishment, it is grace. Heaven's silence is not rejection but permission to continue serving. The longer he stays, the more complete his transformation becomes. Heaven is not withholding rest, it is perfecting love. The monk's work changes with the seasons of his life. He moves from washing to weeding, from weeding to healing. This shows the sanctification of ordinary labor through compassion. The soul ripens in usefulness until, at last, the work of mercy and the work of life are one and the same. 3. The garden and the infirmary. The garden and the infirmary are images of the world itself, fields full of weeds, lives full of pain. The monk's quiet perseverance in these spaces reveals that holiness is not withdrawal from the world, but loving participation in its healing. Each weed pulled is an act of redemption. Each glass of water given to the dying is a sacrament of compassion. The angel's patience represents divine respect for human service, God's willingness to let love run its full course. 4. The true abode of paradise. At the end, when the monk prays for the final summons, the angel's reply becomes the key to the entire allegory. "Sir, where do you think you have been all this time?" Heaven was never far away. The monk had already been living in its presence every day. He washed, weeded, served, and wept with the broken. His chores were his liturgy. His life was already in tune with the eternal order. This closing line overturns the common notion that heaven begins after death. It affirms that those who live in the love of God dwell already in the borders of paradise. Death is not relocation but revelation, the lifting of the veil between the visible and the real. 5. Application for the listener. The story invites us to reconsider our own work. Whether our hands are busy with tools, paperwork, caregiving, or prayer, each task can be a vessel for divine love. The measure of sanctity is not what we do but the spirit in which we do it. God does not need grand gestures, he delights in hearts that stay faithful to the last chore. The weary monk's rest finally comes, not as an escape from duty, but as its completion. His life was a seamless act of worship. So may ours be. When the angel comes for us, may he not need to carry us far, for we will have already been living, quietly and fully, in the presence of God. This is something Mom used to ask me to recite. She wanted me to bless her. "Speak unto Aaron and his sons and tell them this is the way they are to bless my people. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace. In this way, you will put my name on my people and I will bless them,